Hello, we are back on the Imperfect PCOS podcast. Today we are joined by Michelle Yates, and so funny, I was just on her podcast, so we're doing a little switcheroo here. Michelle Yates is a registered dietitian, a licensed medical nutrition therapist, and has her Master of Science in Health Psychology. Her favorite way to practice in the field of dietetics is to blend nutrition sciences with psychology to help women overcome binge eating, emotional eating, and break free from the food stress that comes as a result of frequent dieting and the all or nothing mentality with food. Michelle has overcome her own eating disorder and body dysmorphia, which gives her the "I've been there" perspective for helping women today overcome the same battles. As a side note, she also has PCOS and endometriosis, and now she lives in Nebraska with her high school sweetheart and 2 kiddos. Thank you so much for being here, Michelle.
You're listening to the Imperfect PCOS podcast, where we share no BS science-backed strategies to put your PCOS into remission. I'm your host, Corey Ruth, aka the Women's Dietitian. Let's get into it.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Oh my gosh. Yes, this is such an important topic, and I'm so glad we're diving into it today. There's such a huge connection between disordered eating and PCOS. We are so much more at risk and so much more vulnerable, and I want to dive into that and the why a little bit today. But let's start. I really want to first understand your personal journey. What led you to getting into this field? What led you to kind of starting to create all these different resources for women in this space? Tell us a little bit about your own personal health journey.
Yeah, well, I describe myself as a dabbler. I dabbled in all forms of disordered eating, unfortunately.
Okay.
It was
a little of everything.
a little bit of everything. It was really draining and took a big toll on my quality of life. So, I mean, the thing was I was never getting to the root of my relationship with food, right? I was just constantly trying to do all these quick fixes and make myself feel better. I had body dysmorphia for as long as I can remember.
And can you define that for listeners who might not know what that is?
Yeah, body dysmorphia is essentially when you see yourself differently than you really are. There's a distorted reality. What you see in the mirror, what you see in pictures could be completely different from what reality is.
Got it.
And so for me, it was really crazy when that finally started to subside, for me to look back at pictures of myself. Even now, when I look back at pictures of myself when I was little, I've had this for as long as I can remember. And what I see in the photo now as a recovered individual is so different than what I thought I looked like then. It's bizarre.
Yeah, you see these jokes on social media, I remember thinking I was fat when I was 25, and I'm like, oh yeah, that does happen though.
100%. Yeah, 100%.
Okay.
And so I really wanted to lose weight so I could get some positive feedback from people, and really wanted people's respect. And I just felt like in our culture, that was the way to get it, right? Was to have a hot body.
Yeah, bikini butt.
Yeah. And I was a dancer as well. And so that was another thing too, was having that aesthetically focused environment,
Yes.
So that didn't really help. But anyway, so when I say I dabbled, it started out with just severe restriction. And well, it didn't start out severe. It got severe. It started with me just tracking calories on my fitness pal and stuff. And then, I'm a perfectionist. So I just would lower the calorie goal day by day, try and hit under it. And then eventually, there's a point where your body can't keep up with that. And so it was more so around the time I was in college that I started to experience loss of control eating, binge eating, maybe not clinical, but subclinical, or emotional eating, and just having this back and forth of really wanting to be in control, but I wasn't.
Yeah.
And really it was just biology, doing its job. But at the time I didn't really, I didn't have that concept of that. So it was super shameful for me because I was in school to be a dietitian, right? And so I was like, oh my word, I can't, how can I be struggling with this? But then I took a course on eating disorders and was like, that kind of sounds like me. That might be
Yeah.
what's going on here. And so
Mhm.
that was like a big blessing to be able to be in school, be surrounded by people who had healthy relationships with food and were also
Yes.
healthy, right? Like for me to
Yes.
see that and be like, oh, it's possible to be passionate about your health and wellness, but not be obsessive
Yes.
was like super helpful for me. And then, yeah, I got into the whole intuitive eating side of things. And
Mhm.
that was a long-winded answer, but yeah, it
Yeah.
was really helpful for my recovery. So here I
That's
am.
great. That's so cool. It's so important. Not that it's a necessity, but it's such an added bonus to work in the space of something that you have walked through and kind of
Yeah.
come out on the other side. Not that it's a destination and not a journey, because it totally is. But you're in a place where you can say, yeah, I get it. I've been there. I've walked through that season of my life.
Yeah.
How do you feel? What was the point that you were like, I need help? And
Mm.
what was the turning point for you to say, like, I've got to be on the other side of this because this isn't working for me? Like, what did that look like?
Yeah, there was I mean, I wish there was one beautiful come to Jesus moment, but there
Yeah.
really, I
That's what
mean,
I was searching for.
yeah, I
Okay.
know, I
All
wish
right,
that'd be
fine,
so
fine.
fun. Yeah, but I will say sitting in that class, which was
Mm,
an elective, which is a bummer
right.
that dietitians, that's not just a part of the curriculum, but it's
Yeah,
fine.
so true.
It's another episode, but
Yeah, right. Totally.
sitting in that class and I was already drawn to the field of eating disorders.
Okay.
So I was very like intrigued in the content and everything. And then reading
Hmm.
through diagnostic criteria, I was like,
Yeah.
interesting, that sounds like me. And it was kind of impactful in the sense of I want to be able to help other people with this. And so if I'm struggling, how can I help them? And
Right.
then also I like pretty soon after that, well, at the time I was in a relationship with my now husband, and then we got
Hmm.
engaged and all of that, like,
Hmm.
and I was like, I don't want to be struggling with this in my
Hmm.
marriage, or
Yeah.
if I have kids, I don't
Right.
want a daughter and pass this on to
Yes.
her.
That's
And
powerful.
yeah, and so I
Yeah.
mean, now I do. I have an almost 3-year-old daughter and a son too, but like, there's something particular about a daughter that you're like, I do not
Yes.
want her to feel
Oh,
like she has to
yeah.
go on a diet or something.
Right. So
So
true. I
that
know.
was really motivating.
Yeah, that's a huge motivator. And I think it's so important for, those that are listening that this resonates with, to find your why.
Hmm.
And what that means is those are your strongest motivators, your internal motivators. That's your why. So if you're wanting to work on, conquering some of your PCOS symptoms, and your why is because you want to eventually be a mom, that's powerful. Same
Hmm.
thing, and I don't know if I was talking about this with you or someone else, but when I found out I was having a girl, because I found out pretty early on the gender for both my pregnancies. I was like eager beaver. I had to know. That's just my personality though. I'm like, I know surprises.
Me too. Yeah, same.
I'm a planner. I had to plan. Once I found out how I was having a girl, I felt like I was hit with a brick of like all this pressure and responsibility of raising a young woman in like our fat phobic, obsessed with skinniness and being thin, and like weight
Mhm.
is attached, like your whole value is your weight. I just felt this immense amount of pressure, and I did not feel like that when I found out I was having a son. It's
Mm.
just so interesting and sad, honestly,
Yeah.
that we have to even think about that. But it really is so real for so many of us. And I thank you, for sharing your story. It's
Hmm.
so important, to others to know that they're not alone in that.
Yeah.
And there are so many ways that we can help ourselves. And I really want to define for listeners, what is emotional eating and what is binge eating, and why might they happen? Like, what are some reasons why those two things occur, and do they occur together? Like, what's the difference?
Yeah, yeah, really good question. So, emotional eating is essentially like we're using food to cope with emotions.
Okay.
Just like you could be using anything. You could be scrolling on Instagram, you could be drinking
Hmm.
alcohol. Like if
Okay.
you're trying to escape from a feeling or make it better through
Uh-huh.
food, that's emotional eating. And it
Okay.
for sure can turn into binge eating. So, binge eating is more so it's tough because it's like the clinical criteria is kind of subjective still. It's like
Interesting.
you're having a large amount of food in a small amount of time, and it's like, what's a
Mm,
large amount of food to somebody, right? But
right.
in general, it's like, okay, does the average individual in this average moment eat that much? Probably, like if you would say probably not, it might be a
Mm-hmm.
binge.
Okay.
Thanksgiving doesn't count, right? Everybody's eating a huge
Right.
amount on Thanksgiving.
Yes.
That's, it's
Yeah.
not the same. It's more like,
Right.
okay, it's a random Tuesday, nobody's around. And I
Mm.
would say also it would be more like a binge if you feel a huge sense of shame with it. You're being really secretive about it. You can't stop
Okay.
thinking about food.
Okay.
And also
Mm.
some people experience like storm eating. They don't even remember it. It's like there's
Oh,
something that comes over
wow.
them. And
Is that like
so,
nighttime or anytime?
well, it can happen at any time. And
Okay.
nighttime eating syndrome is a thing as well, where
Okay.
people find themselves getting up in the middle of the night. Sometimes they don't remember it and
Wow.
eating.
Like
So,
sleepwalking.
yeah, exactly. So
Okay.
it's the criteria, I guess, is kind of gray a little bit, but at the
Okay.
same time, it's like if you feel stressed out about food or you're constantly
Mm.
thinking about it, it's on your mind, you use it to cope with emotions,
Mm-hmm.
you're secretly eating and distressed about your relationship with food,
Mm-hmm.
that is a reason to get help. Like you don't need to meet a criteria, you know what I mean?
Got
So,
it. Yeah. If it's stressful for
um,
you, that's enough.
100%,
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
100%.
Okay.
So,
Got it.
yeah, and the reasons behind it is typically so with emotional eating, it's like emotions, right? We can pretty
Okay.
much,
Yeah.
tie that to
It's a,
emotions,
right.
which
Okay.
can blend into binges as well. But I think another huge reason for binge eating, and if you round up everybody that struggled with binge eating, this would probably solve 95% of the people who are struggling if they just stopped restriction. And that can look
Mm,
mental or physical. It could be,
yes. Let's dive into
I'm,
that.
yeah. So physical restriction is like, I'm limiting my calories to this many calories a day, or I'm
Okay.
not allowing myself to have carbs. I'm on the keto
Okay.
diet,
Yeah.
whatever, or any diet really. But
Right.
and then mental restriction, I've also heard of it as like described as restraint, is
Mm-hmm.
just that mental component of, hey, I might be allowing myself to have this physically, like I might literally be eating it, but I still feel like it's wrong and I feel like I'm not supposed to. And
Mm-hmm.
that can kind of like trigger this all or nothing mentality, even just like rebel phase where we're like, F it,
Yeah.
I'm just gonna go for it then. Like
Mm-hmm.
I'm already
Mm-hmm.
eating it, so I'm just gonna eat it all. And then,
Right.
yeah, so that I
Okay.
would say those are the top reasons for emotional and binge eating.
Okay. And would you say that restrictive eating, like I'm not eating sugar, I'm not eating gluten, I'm not eating dairy, I'm not eating soy, like all of these things, that can actually potentially contribute to a binge because of that? Is that where the mental restriction
Yeah,
piece comes in? Okay.
yeah,
Yeah, that's such an interesting concept because I think, yeah, a lot of us, when we think about restriction, we think of that classic scenario of, like I'm no longer stocking, I'm no longer ordering pizza ever again. And and
hmm
that's kind of restricting that. But there's so many more components that go into that. That's so
yeah,
interesting.
yeah. With this whole like anti-inflammatory and clean eating is super popular right now,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
even that, if we get stuck in this world of, oh, gluten is bad, dairy is bad, this is inflammatory, even just that, like putting any kind of label of bad or
Mm-hmm.
evil or wrong can trigger
Right.
this like rebellious mentality. And so,
Yes.
and that gets hard when somebody truly does need to restrict something, right? For a medical
Mm,
reason, if
that's
they
true.
are genuinely
Celiac
celiac or,
or
yeah, like dairy, lactose
lactose
intolerant or
intolerant.
whatever.
Yes, that's so
Um,
true.
it can be tricky. So that's like fun for me to work on with my clients is not
Mm,
letting a medical need become this new like mental gymnastics game of trying to figure
mm.
out how to have a healthy relationship with that.
Oh, that must be really complicated. Yeah,
It's
I can
fun.
totally see that. Yeah, it's fun for you, huh? Totally. So how and I want to share this story too. my personal examples of restriction does not work well for me. It doesn't work well for me food wise. It does not work well for me alcohol wise. It does not, I cannot put something off limits for myself. I just know that about myself. So I want to share this story. Long ago, before I became a dietitian, I saw, it was a documentary on Netflix or a book. I think it was a documentary, Forks Over Knives, or I think it was called.
Oh, classic.
Yeah, you have to be vegan and you can't have like fats either. So basically I was like, oh, fat-free vegan, that's the way I need to go. I lost a ton of weight, which was, on one hand, I felt great about, because I gained so much weight in college, and this was like after college, and I felt so good. And that did not last long, because it was horribly restrictive, and my hormones, I lost my period. It was this whole thing. So anyway, I avoided meat for a really long time, thinking that that was the healthiest way to eat. And I remember I was doing some like chef catering work, and I was working for this company. And this guy who was my boss, we did this whole event at this really, really like fancy house in Beverly Hills. I used to live in LA. And my boss was like, oh, we have all this leftover food. Do you want to take it home? And my boyfriend at the time ate meat. And there was a bunch of chicken wings, like buffalo chicken wings. And I was like, oh, okay, like I'll take those home to him. Oh my gosh. And this was in my early 20s, and there was definitely alcohol involved, but I got into those chicken wings, and I hadn't eaten meat in so long, at like 2:00 in the morning. And I found myself like covered in like buffalo sauce, like buffalo wing sauce. And I'd eaten like all of the chicken secretively while my boyfriend was sleeping. And I was like, this is the like weirdest feeling. Like, what is going on? And it wasn't like at that point I was underweight or I was battling anorexia or anything like that. I had just been restricting meat for so long that it got to the point. Not everyone will have the buffalo chicken moment at 2 a.m., but I did. That's why restriction does not work well for me, for Corey. But it's, that thinking about that example, I always think about that. And like, it's so true. Like, it was just a physiological response. It wasn't me saying, I really want these and I'm going for it. It's just the way that our bodies can be set up for many of us. And I really want to normalize this, because what happened in that moment was completely normal. It sounds, and I can laugh about it now, but it's totally normal. But it felt really scary, because I felt out of control, and it felt really shameful at that point. And I felt like I had broken rules by eating some chicken wings. I can't believe I'm saying that now, because I eat chicken wings all the time now. But it was just crazy. So I would, anyone who's listening to this, who's going through any of this and feels like it resonates, normalize it here, because this is something that your body is your barometer, and your body is telling you something. Your body's giving you signs, and it's really up to us to listen. And I did after that. And I went through my whole own journey. But I would love for you to give some practical tips for listeners, as far as the emotional eating is, it's so common, because eating is just one coping mechanism, and there are so many, right? And it's something that a lot of my followers and my program members and a lot of women with PCOS struggle with. What are some tips that we can give, like for handling emotional eating? Because we eat for so many more reasons outside of hunger. We eat to socialize, we eat to celebrate. What are some top tips that you give?
Yeah. Well, I think it's important to note that emotional eating in and of itself is not necessarily like a bad thing. It's like you said, it's just another tool in the toolkit.
Right.
And it can get tricky, right, when we're always using that tool to cope. And so it's one of those things where I think if it's something we're like, oh, this is bad every single time, then it just, again, we get in that like all or nothing mentality of good versus bad.
Right.
And that's not very helpful either. So just to like add that caveat for anybody that maybe needs to hear that today. But
love it. Yes.
Yeah, I think like, first of all, it's just, tying in your story, Corey, of like restriction for so long. Make sure, the chicken wing moment, learn from that. Make sure that you're taking care of yourself physically. If you're not feeding yourself enough food, it's going to be so much harder to know if you're experiencing feelings of wanting to eat because you're actually hungry, or if you have something emotional going on that needs to be coped with differently.
Yes.
So being able to work through your emotions, it's just really hard when you've got your biology screaming at you to eat, right? And so
Yes.
that is like really important. We need to make sure that we're taking care of ourselves physically. You don't need to get mad at yourself if you're like snacking or if you don't have willpower. You could actually just be hungry. And so learn what that looks like for you to really like satisfy your physiological needs to eat. But then secondly, I think a lot of us, I'm raising my hand here, are like, we just love to sweep things under the rug, right? And pretend like we're superwoman or robots that don't feel.
Yeah.
And that's not helpful. We do have feelings, reality check, we're human.
Yes.
So we kind of need to get comfortable with sitting in our feelings and recognizing what the heck is going on with us. Otherwise, we can subconsciously turn towards coping, and food can be one of those tools if we are never really getting to the problem. I actually heard this really great analogy about, it was from a psychologist, and she was talking about like this picture of being in a pool, right? You're swimming in a pool and you've got a beach ball, and your beach ball represents your feelings. And so a lot of times what we try to do is we try to just shove our feelings down under the water. And so with this example, when we're pushing the beach ball down under the water, what is it going to do? It's going to, like, as soon as we let go of it, it's just going to pop right back up. And the more we push it down, the more it comes up. And so that's not helpful, right? When we try to shove it down, and we're still physically touching those feelings. We're still involved with them, right? We're just trying to like push them away, and it's not helping. And so with your emotions, it's so important that you learn, and you can work with a therapist on this if you need to, like whoever you need to, but it's so important that you accept them as a part of you and you make room for them. And like with the beach ball, if you just let the beach ball go and float around in the pool and let it coexist with you, you can acknowledge it, you can know it's there, it's a part of your environment, but it's level, right? Because it's just floating along, and it's also, you're not even touching it really. At some points you might be, but it's not this constant aggressive relationship, that's up and down. So
I love that.
I think that's huge. And the last thing is like, just give yourself grace, just like you would to your dog or your cat or your best friend. Like, give yourself the same amount of grace that you would give to something or someone you love, because getting stuck in shame cycles is only going to worsen your relationship with food and make this problem worse. You kind of have to like cut out of that cycle by giving yourself grace, and that's your ticket out, is reframing your mindset to be like, you know what, I'm a human and this is normal, and I just need to like figure out what's going on here, So.
I love that. And that whole concept is, giving ourselves grace. If we're not doing that, that sets us up for this like shame cycle and that guilt cycle, and then it's like we start the circle all over again.
Yeah.
There's no way around it. PCOS is complex and multifaceted. What we know about it, including how best to treat it, is constantly changing. That's why I've dedicated my life's work to helping women put their PCOS into remission. Inside my signature program, the PCOS Boss Academy, women lose weight permanently without restriction and master their most stubborn PCOS symptoms. If you're looking to get pregnant or want to be a mom in the future, my ultra-successful Get Pregnant with PCOS program supports moms to be every step of the way in conquering PCOS symptoms and bringing home the baby of their dreams. Plus, there's an additional weight loss mode to check into. These are all of the science-backed nutrition and lifestyle tweaks you need to improve your PCOS and change your life from a qualified healthcare provider and leading PCOS expert in the field. Ultimately, we are in control of our PCOS, and I would love to work with you inside one of my upcoming programs so you can step into the best version of yourself and start feeling like you again.
Let's talk about emotional eating as a coping mechanism, because it is one, as you mentioned, but there are so many others out there. Are there other coping mechanisms that you recommend or that you if you're working with a client who is going through this and they're using food as some kind of comforting tool, how do you help them find other comforting, or you know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
Other coping mechanisms? Like, how does that work?
Yeah. I mean, it's so individualistic to the
Yeah,
person because what they're
true,
trying
true.
to cope with is going to depend on them, and
Right.
like whatever their lived experience is. So,
Okay.
I mean, really, you've got to find out what it is. What are we trying to cope with? Like, for example, I have a
Mm-hmm.
client that was struggling with binge eating every single night, and she would drink as well. And
Mm-hmm.
she got to a place where she recognized her husband was an ER nurse, and so he would work
Mm-hmm.
overnight, and she just
Mm-hmm.
felt so much anxiety about being home
Mm-hmm.
alone with the kids,
Mm-hmm.
and that she would eat, she would turn to food, she would turn to alcohol, and
Mm-hmm.
her being able to recognize that was really big. But then, of course,
Yeah.
like recognizing it is just one step. You also have to
Right.
like learn how to be okay with it and beyond that. And so
Right.
I think for her, it was just there was a variety of things that we did together. But I think her
Mm-hmm.
husband even changed his schedule, so that helped a lot. But
Oh,
she was
that's
able
really
to,
great.
yeah, she was able to identify too that
Mm-hmm.
like she had been raised in a family where it was really fat phobic, and
Mm.
like her dad literally last week told her he noticed like that she was losing weight, and he was like, good. Like he complimented
Oh
her and was like,
God. All
good.
right.
And
Let's
she was
get him
like,
on the show over here.
I know. She was like, so that's what I'm dealing with.
Oh gosh.
So it's
I
like,
I had a father like that too. I get it. Yeah.
oh, I'm so
It's
sorry. That's
that's
like,
okay.
I just
He
feel
passed
like,
away. I mean, I love him obviously
mm,
dearly, but man, whew, yeah,
yeah,
same thing.
yeah.
It's so
It's
hard.
brutal,
It's
brutal
so
to hear
hard.
that from your dad. Like a
Oh God, yeah.
relationship with your
Mm-hmm.
dad, like that's so, like you
Mm-hmm.
want him to care for your heart, not
Right.
objectify you like that. And so,
Right.
anyway, she deals with a lot of like internalized fat phobia too. And
Mm-hmm.
her like binge eating
Mm-hmm.
as a result of her husband being gone just made her want to binge
Mm.
even more because she felt shame for gaining weight and stuff. So it's just like
Mm.
there's so many nuances that you have to work
Yeah.
through. It's a lot.
Okay. So it really kind of depends on that person's situation and what factors we can control.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. So it's helpful to work with someone who can help you identify, those areas of opportunity rather than just trying to suss them out yourself. Because you can say, instead of eating, I'm going to journal. That might not work
Yeah.
for you. It might work for,
Right.
Sally over there in the corner, but journaling may not fill that void. There's other
Hmm.
things that you need to look into changing and optimizing to fix that.
Yeah, I hear a
But
lot from women that they'll try to do like the affirmations thing, right? Like I look in the mirror and I tell myself I'm beautiful, or I write myself
oh,
sticky notes,
yeah.
and that can work for like you said, Sally down the street or whoever,
Yeah.
but for them, like I'm talking to them because it hasn't worked, so we have to take a different approach. And again, it just like
Yeah.
it's so dependent on what's underneath the surface. What's the why behind all of this? What do you
Okay.
really need to feel? What are your true emotional needs?
Interesting. Gosh, it goes so deep, like deeper than we can get into here. Yeah,
Yeah.
I would love I know this is like a tangent, but I'm just fascinated by this. Do you have like another example of a client like that? Like of something where you identified something that you could change for them that would help
Hmm.
this emotional eating, this binge eating issue? Like another example of that, because I think that's just so helpful to hear. Like there's hope, and anyone listening, even though it does depend on your unique situation, just hearing what worked for others is, I don't know. It's like looking at meal plans. I just love it. I'm just like, oh, that's cool. Like, I don't know. Bad example. Bad
I love
analogy,
that you
but
love that. I love that you love meal plans because I hate meal plans. They
I
stress me
know. Now I
out.
create them for a living. So I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, I like it. I like it.
But no, I would say like the biggest trigger I see is just body image, like
Mhm.
women,
Yeah.
there's so much. That's like one of the core things that I work on with my clients is body image because that is a consistent trigger for women, especially when we're told all the time in this amazing society that glorifies like the skinniest person you can be.
Right.
It's
Uh-huh.
so difficult to look in the mirror and be okay with yourself, no matter what you look
Yeah.
like. You can
Oh,
still
yeah.
look like Kim Kardashian and probably still have things that you don't like about yourself. And so
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that is the biggest thing, and that I see the most often is dissatisfaction with their body. It just kind of drives them towards food. And it's a big cycle of, again, those shame cycles of, I hate my body, so I'm going to turn to food to make myself feel better. Now, after I've eaten, I'm going to go look in the mirror to see if I feel any better. But now I feel worse because I just binge ate and I'm all bloated and I don't feel good. So I'm just going to go eat some more food. And it's just like nonstop. And so you have to cut the cycle somehow. So.
Do you notice there's oftentimes this correlation between these things and parents having parents that give negative comments, or is that a common thing? Because
almost every time.
Really, yeah, gosh, okay, and that just serves as another reminder, with our own, if we have kids or if we're planning on that in the future, really putting effort and thought into not only how you're speaking to them, obviously, but how you're speaking to yourself, because they're watching and they're listening every word, no pressure. They're listening to everything you say. My 3.5-year-old, I can 100% vouch for that statement. It's so true. And it's so important to be really, really mindful, because that can make or break someone's your child, especially if that child is a female, their personal journey with using eating as a comforting tool. For you, what does life look like as a recovered emotional eater? You went through this, you walked through this, you're out on the other side. What does it look like now? Like, what are some key differences between then and now? And so that people listening who are struggling now can understand how great, it can feel to tackle this and really be at peace with it.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'll speak more to just being like generally a disordered eater, because like I said, I've dabbled in all kinds of things.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Emotionally.
Same girl.
That's right. So, I mean, the best way I can describe it is like, it's like your world goes from black and white to color, like everything is about food, everything's about your body, everything's about what you ate that day, what you're going to eat that day, what you're eating right now, what your friend's going to eat, how you look in your jeans, how you wish you looked in your jeans, like all of that. And that just takes up so much of your freaking brain space. And you don't realize it until it's gone. And it's like, now I feel like I can function at full capacity, other than the fact that I'm a mom and I always have a million things to go at the same time.
I can relate to this.
But like, I'm able to build a business of my dreams, be a stay-at-home mom, like have a healthy marriage, like all these things that I can focus on now.
Right.
My friendships, my family, like literally anything and everything I want to, instead of food. Right. And so it's just like you're living your life to the fullest instead, Yeah,
I can imagine it's so freeing to not feel controlled in ways that, and also to know that you do have more control over how your body will, feel and look, because you hold the cards, you hold the power.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
That
absolutely.
is so encouraging. Something that a lot of women struggle with, I think, and I can totally attest to this as well, is sort of this all or nothing mentality, this black or white like thinking. And this can be such a roadblock. And I see this every day in my practice, where women, and we're perfectionists, right? A lot of, especially when with PCOS, I don't know what it is, but we're like these type A little perfectionists. And we want to do everything right. Yeah. And dietitians too. Like, oh my gosh, dietitians too. Like, we want to be perfect. We want our A+. That's me also. But when this all or nothing mentality creeps up, it can completely derail our progress. And something that I've had to learn, and something I try to teach, is, take the B grade. Like, take the B grade. You don't need the A+. Aim for the B, because the B will get you where you want to go without killing yourself and driving yourself nuts in the process. So that's something that I like to teach in my practice. But what are some practical tips you can give? Because this all or nothing mindset so perfectly feeds into disordered eating patterns.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
What are some tools for women who deal with that, who struggle?
Yeah.
And I'm taking notes too.
Yeah.
Write these down.
It's so, I mean, yeah, especially if you're interested in nutrition at all, it seems to be like people are
Yeah.
very all or nothing about it.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's so interesting because I feel like people that are like passionate about nutrition at all, they don't have to be a dietitian. They can just be like your mother-in-law, you know. They
Great example. Kidding. Everyone's like, yes. I don't have one, so.
I feel like everybody thinks they are a dietitian, right? Like
Oh my God, yes. I always
they
talk about
read
this.
something online, they
Oh
see
yeah.
something on Instagram from someone who's not qualified to talk about nutrition, and they
Yes.
just take it on like it's their freaking religion. And it's
Uh,
so hard. Of course, we come up with these food rules because we're told all the time from
right.
media, like we've got all this sensationalized, groundbreaking news about what the best thing is for your diet. And basically, every
Mm-hmm.
time something is groundbreaking, it's completely false.
Right.
And it's so
Oh.
frustrating. And so, like, it takes a lot of work to untangle those
Mm.
belief systems that we create around food,
Full-time
about
job.
like even just things like the dirty dozen, like really well-intentioned things can
Yeah.
be so, they can turn into this set of rules that are so rigid and people hold on to so close-handedly that it just
Mm.
stresses them the F out.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but when we like can untangle those belief systems and challenge them and think, where did this even come from? Right? Like,
Right?
who
Yeah.
is this source that I'm hearing this from? Or are
Yes.
they qualified, or is this
Mm. Yeah,
evidence-based?
exactly.
Then we can start to really enjoy all foods. And so I think that's, I mean, it's not the most tactical tool, but really just being
Mm-hmm.
able to challenge your beliefs around food and
Right.
ask yourself good questions. Where did this come from? Who did I hear from? What is it even doing
Mm-hmm.
for me? Will it
Mm-hmm.
really derail my health goals if I have a glass of milk or a cheese stick or whatever it is, you know? Like, and then I think it's
That just sounds
trial and
terrible.
error, you know? Like,
Yeah.
try to eat the pizza and see what happens. Just
Mm-hmm.
try it, you
Yeah.
know? And
Yes.
challenge those beliefs. So,
Challenging those beliefs. So true. I love it. And it's so true. Like the amount of misinformation out there is so wild.
mhm.
I was talking to my fiance about that. You know, he's a wildland firefighter, and so his job on the crew is he's the sawyer, which means he is the one who's taking that chainsaw and cutting down these burning trees.
Holy
There's
cow.
only usually one or two in a crew, I think. So
That's a tough
um,
job.
yes, it's very tough, and he's so brave. I'm so proud of him. But we were talking about our jobs, and I was like, you know, if you're explaining what you do to somebody, that's, I mean, 99% of like, there's chance that they have no idea what you're talking about, right?
Mhm.
They didn't grow up learning how to use a chainsaw on a burning tree, right? So they
Yeah.
can't relate. Everybody eats. Everybody eats. So
Mhm.
everybody has an opinion about nutrition and what they should or shouldn't be eating. And yes, you see one study published where like n equals 9, and I'm like flooded with messages. Is this true? Is this accurate? I'm like, whoa, wait. Let me look at the study.
There's 1,000 others that
Yeah,
say the opposite.
right. And that's the problem. Yeah. And it's nutrition is an ever evolving science. So, the all or nothing mentality, if we're thinking in that way, and what I mean when I say that, I should have clarified this is I'm working on, healthier eating habits for my PCOS, and I'm doing all the things. I'm perfect. And then all of a sudden I go on vacation. And
Mhm.
then I come back from vacation on Sunday and I cannot, I think about how many air quotes wrong or air quotes bad food choices I made over my weekend. And
Mhm.
now I feel like shit and I'm not going to restart because I have no motivation. I'm a horrible person. I can't ever do anything right. And deeper we go into this cycle. So that black and white mentality, challenging that, number one is like, okay, well, what are the food choices? Right. And where did we hear that those were bad? First of all, like,
Mhm.
where did we hear that we can't ever enjoy ourselves freely on vacation? That's a belief, and that's something to challenge. But yeah, that all or nothing mentality is something that I see so frequently. I don't know if you see that a lot in your practice. I would
Oh, every single person.
assume.
But I mean, it's debatably like the hardest thing to overcome because it's so deeply rooted into your beliefs and values, right? Like it really
Mm-hmm.
does become, I can't think of a better example than it's just like your religion. It's something that you so deeply value, and it's hard to challenge something that you value so much, but you do
Mm-hmm.
have to think about, is this actually, like, let's zoom out for a second. Is this
Yeah.
actually helping me, right?
Okay. Yeah.
Like,
So zoom
if
out.
I'm, yeah, if I'm binging on every single weekend because I'm eating super clean during the week, is that
Mm,
actually the life I want to live? And is that
right.
helping me with my other values? Like, do you value friendship, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you can't go to dinner with your friends because of the diet you're on, that's
Mm-hmm.
not supporting your other value, which is friendship and
So
human
true.
connection and stuff. And the example with like having a daughter,
Mm-hmm.
is the way that you're eating going to help support the value that you have of your daughter having
Mm-hmm.
a good relationship with food? If
Mm-hmm.
not, you got to challenge that.
Yeah, that's so true. That's such a good way to put it too.
Mm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's tough though. It's tough for sure.
Oh yeah. No, I like how you likened it to religion. I've never even thought of it like that, but it's so true.
Yeah, people are so diehard about their nutrition rules. And it's
Mm-hmm.
like, unfortunately, they have to hit rock bottom in order to be okay with changing their food rules or letting go of,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
a bummer.
I know. Yeah. And it's, sometimes they don't need to, they can post on that and that's fine. But,
Hmm.
it can be clear when it, becomes an issue.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. So another, practical tool it sounds like is just being able to try and zoom out. Zoom
Hmm.
out of that, if we're using that weekend trip example, because that's something that everyone has struggled with at some point or
Hmm.
will. And I
Hmm.
speak from personal experience.
Yeah, same.
Does that weekend represent every single day of your life? No. And I love that, and I always roll my eyes at this, but the 80-20 rule,
Yeah.
in dietetics, 80% of the time, eat the way you want to be eating 20% of the time. But it kind of is a helpful, tool,
Yeah.
at least in my opinion, because 80% of the time, like that, we leave room for fun and flexibility and
Hmm.
freedom. So we're not eating like garbage all day long every day and feeling sick as a result.
Right.
But we're,
Yeah.
we're being flexible and, we're still striving towards making choices that make us feel good. And that
Mhm.
feeling good is what, we really want to focus on the
Yeah.
most, especially when we're working on dietary changes for something like PCOS or, another kind of health condition.
Yeah. And there's
So,
like, I mean, like you
yeah.
said earlier, there's a parameter, like your body has
Mm-hmm.
the parameter, right? And so there's a
Yeah.
limit for any kind of food. It could be
Mm-hmm.
like broccoli. There's a point where you eat so much broccoli, you don't feel good.
Oh,
There's a
yeah.
point where you eat so much ice cream, you don't feel good. And so you have
Mm-hmm.
to find like what works for you. And I agree, the 80-20 rule, I kind of roll my eyes too, but I'm also like, well, it's
Mm-hmm.
super helpful for some people though, because
Yeah.
generally, if you allow foods in your life without being restrictive, but you also
Mm-hmm.
are mindful of like what helps you feel good physically,
Right.
then naturally you just kind of end up in an 80-20 type of lifestyle
Yes,
anyway.
that's what I
And
found. Yeah.
it's what feels good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. I love that. It's so true. Just doing this for so long, that's kind of naturally where my body has found its rhythm, is kind of,
Yeah,
it's sort of that percentage, give or take.
I agree.
Yeah, well, amazing. This has been such a insightful discussion. I'm so glad that we were able to dive into some of these topics deeper. It does sound like, though, that if listeners struggle with anything that we've talked about, that there's so much work, that great work that can be done
Hmm.
to make more progress in this area. It's definitely not something I specialize in. So tell us, like, what anything you're currently offering. How can folks find you? How do you work with clients? Give us all that spiel.
Yeah, thanks for asking. So, I mean, I'd
Yeah,
love for you to just come and follow me on Instagram. You'll get to know me pretty quickly over there.
awesome.
And I have my own podcast too. It's
Yes.
called Nourished and Free. Corey's been on it, so
Yes.
you can go listen to her episode.
Yes.
And yeah, so I mean, what I would recommend if you are just curious about what doing this type of work looks like is just go check out my free mini course.
Mm.
You should be able, I'm sure at the time of you listening to this, it should be available in the link in my bio on Instagram. You can always just like message me too.
Okay.
I'll respond for sure. So, but that's a great place to start is my free mini course, and I'll walk you through what this type of a journey looks like and the hope that's awaiting you, because there is so much hope for you.
Yes.
And yeah, if you'd like, we can always work together too, or talk about working together. I offer a 16-week program. It's called Nourished and Free as well.
Cool.
Same thing as my podcast. And that's really where we dig deep into things like emotional eating and binge eating and food stress, that all or nothing mentality. And it's truly just, I'm obsessed with it. It is the best. And I get to see so many women come out on the other side.
That's so amazing.
The world being in color, you know, and they get to enjoy life again. So.
Oh, that's so transformational. Yay, good. So definitely check out Michelle. I'll drop all of that info in the show notes, and you can check out everything she has to offer. Thank you so much, Michelle.
Thank you, Corey. It was so good to be here.